that the whole QAnon movement was like, it was an idea that was like a mind virus that infects vulnerable people who have no sense of community, who generally they're lonely, they lack a sense of purpose, they maybe suffer from depression, et cetera, et cetera. And basically that equates to a weaker immune system when it comes to detecting bullshit. And that's kind of like, if it were a biological virus, they would get sick from it. Is that sort of accurate at all?
I mean, that's a great analogy, I think. A very helpful analogy. Yeah, I'd said a little bit ago that it's kind of like the Q is like operates similar to like a digital virus in a way.
Like an idea virus.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and Ron even released seemingly released a virus through one of his videos on his followers, and they were still fine with it in the aftermath, like a couple months ago. It was like, well, why would he be fine with that? He released Q, which operated in a very similar way to like malware, and yeah, it does draw in people who are more susceptible to it, and I think what makes people susceptible to it is a distrust in the media, a distrust in institutions, and a sense that just they're being lied to, and so they turn away from these sources, and they look elsewhere. But the sources that they find, or QAnon is not a more reliable source. But it is more sensational. It's more exciting, and it tells a story of heaven or hell, black and white, and it's sort of all or nothing. It's not it's not about the banality of evil, which isn't sexy. So it becomes about something far more ethereal, otherworldly, more magical, more fantasy. It gives people a sense also that they have more control in their lives, gives them a sense of purpose, and it gives them community. And I think we also live in a society right now where, people are looking for other ways to get religious experience. Maybe before some of that sense of community might have been extracted from like watching a sports team, but it's almost like the all of the things that would draw people to a church before are drawing them now to politics. Like that same level of fervor and faith is what you see in QAnon, and the same level of sort of passion and just belief. It's like all of that kind of religious thinking is now being put in a political box, and so that's why it does have a lot of kind of religious qualities to it as well. But the sort of red pill that I think gets a lot of people hooked on Q in the beginning is something that it relies on a certain amount of truth in society. It's said, I think at the beginning of the plan to save the world, it's like, have you ever wondered why there's like homelessness, hunger, why you can never seem to get out of debt, why there are endless wars, right? And these are all things that people are like, yeah, why all of that stuff? Which speaks to that why institutional failure point. And then it leads people down a rabbit hole of increasingly implausible beliefs. But the central tenet that sort of draws them in is the failures that I think many people are experiencing in society. If the institutions were doing a better job, if the media was doing a better job, if we weren't in like a clickbait society, where people were driven into echo chambers by algorithms, the conversation would just be a lot different. But there's sort of a confluence of factors here that have created an opportunity for something like Q. I don't think it would have worked 10 years ago. And if I had to guess what caused all of this, if I could say, if there's one thing that I could go back in time and say, change this, and we wouldn't get to the point we're at now, with sort of hyperpolarization where people turn to something like QAnon, it would be online privacy, which sounds at first like it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, what's the connection between those two things? But I made a film almost a decade ago called Terms and Conditions May Apply. And in that film, I highlighted, all of the ways in which Silicon Valley and the government were kind of working together to extract our personal information and what the cost of that might be. And at the time, people would say, well, I have nothing to hide. What does it matter? What does it matter if Facebook is collecting thousands of data points on me, knows my fears and my insecurities, if knows everything about me? What's the harm of that? All they're doing is, trying to sell me shoes, or they're just using it for advertising, right? You're like, well, now we know what the cost is. The cost is that all of that personal data could be used to manipulate us, to play on those insecurities, to drive us towards increasingly sensational content that reinforces our biases, and results in, I think, the kind of hyperpolarized society that we have now. And Q, the stuff that Q was doing, that would have normally just stayed on the chans. But because it was sensational and exciting, and because there were algorithms that could help fuel it, it was like gasoline. And individuals like Ron Watkins and those who he was coordinating with would know how to capitalize on that, and how to it wasn't 8chan specifically that made Q a hit. It was YouTube. It was all of these QTubers who started talking about all this wild stuff, and it drew in an audience. It drew in a big audience. And a lot of these guys, they were big fans of Alex Jones. They were kind of his acolytes, right? And they were just taking what they had learned from Alex Jones and now repurposing that same sort of entertainment style, using Q as their as sort of their daily input. And because Q would frequently, ask new questions, there would be this whole ecosystem that formed around Q. It gave, and because they got a ton of followers almost overnight from talking about Q, it created a functional feedback loop where a lot of people were able to profit off of talking about something, and they would not have been able to be successful on YouTube otherwise. So YouTube is more responsible for QAnon success, I think, than almost any other site out there.